Good Lion has teamed up with a small family business to bring you a topical that's been proven to detoxify the brain of heavy metals, poisons, and other toxins, all of which when detoxed make way for optimal brain function. ARII is an herbal formulation for anyone needing to detox, and specifically for anyone with autism. ARII has not only been freeing those with autism, but also those taking care of loved ones with it. Caretakers can breathe again, and autistic behaviors dissipate. This formulation is an herbal blend which is produced in small batches, containing only the cleanest and most vibrant ingredients. Because the individual ingredients are uniquely extracted, gently and naturally by the sun, they can be absorbed directly into the bloodstream within seconds, via the soles of the feet or the navel. This method avoids the digestive tract and has proven more effective than pills or capsules. This is a two-step program requiring a 12-day detox first, which helps eliminate any heavy metals and toxins accumulated in the brain. This is then followed by autism support and is recommended to use for as long as results are desired. The formulation contains no chemicals, CO2, or solvents, ensuring that it's pure and natural. Are you treating with ARII?
Welcome to the Love and Action Show with me, Alpa Soni. I am very excited about introducing my guest that I have on the show with me now. But before I do that, as you've just seen the advert for ARII, just a reminder to everyone that's been watching the previous show and people that are watching coming onto the show for the first time today, that we've extended our offer of ARII till the end of the year. And that's 30% off all of our products. And the code is in, and I've done a typo there yet again, it's these nails. New Year 30, all capitals, not new Q, what I've done. But welcome, Brad. How are you? I have been really looking forward to this.
It's wonderful to see you again, Alpa. And the last time, it was great to have you on my show in discussing ARII. And as you know, friends of mine from military, he and I went into the military together. He has a son who's autistic. So thank you very much for ARII. And they're very excited to see what that's going to happen there. And thank you for what you and Nick do for serving humanity. Yeah. So absolute great honor to be blessed to have met you in person in Anaheim and then have you on my show. And I'm grateful to be here with all you amazing divine lions and lionesses. So.
Well, you certainly stirred up a bit of a crowd. The numbers have fired up, and I actually shared it on all my news channels, social media channels. But I want to introduce you properly, Brad, because you have quite a story. And a lot of my shows focus on this kind of spiritual warfare that we've been going through. And then I've been speaking a lot about autism. And then there's a lot of the camaraderie that goes on, which is good, bad, and ugly. And we discuss the geopolitical arena quite a bit. But you have quite a unique story. And yes, it was a beautiful, beautiful, energetic connection that we have both had at the TT show in Anaheim. We're not allowed to say it because, you know, apparently that is that's not right and could get me censored. But I just introduce you with your background, if that's okay. So a bit about Brad. He's former Canadian media producer and two-time optioned Hollywood screenwriter. His name is pronounced as Brad Wozny. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, like Wozny. Yeah, you know, good old
Wozny. Was my knee. And he's the host of The Sovereign Show on Rumble. You can see his lovely graphics there. And Buddha, look, in ode of you, I've got the Buddha in the back. And his show stands for, and this is the bit that I love when I read this part. His show stands for love, levity, and liberty, because after all, love is the most powerful force in the universe. And this is why I called my show the Love in Action Show. So I can have wonderful guests like you that, you know, spread the vibrations of love.
Mhm.
And of course, I agree with you here that love and laughter is the best medicine when covering all topics from ancient to the current quantum.
Yeah.
So he has had quite a unique life. So I've just made some notes here.
Okay.
He served his country at the federal level as a
Mhm.
Canadian infantry soldier. He has served the provincial level as a wildfire ranger, leaping out of helicopters to fight forest fires. And he's been a part, like myself, part of the corporate rat race where shortly after the Third World Center towers collapsed in their footprint, he stood at ground zero witnessing the heroic rescue efforts which went on. And then Brad was walking the halls of the Pentagon 72 hours later and 18 stories below it.
Yep.
So he's witnessed everything from bureaucracy to inside jobs and cabal corruption.
Yep.
Brad, welcome, welcome, welcome. You've got quite a story there, but I actually want to start off with the juicy part. Hollywood screenwriter. Let's make that as a starting point. Tell us a bit about yourself, your journey, starting with Hollywood.
Yeah, it was a long journey, actually. As a matter of fact, it goes back to Top Gun when it first came out. My piano teacher took myself and some kids from our neighborhood to Top Gun. And, you know, I'm sitting there looking at that screen as a kid, and I'm like, that's it. That's all I want to do. I either want to fly jets for the Royal Canadian Air Force, which was F-18s at the time. They didn't have Tomcats. Or write movies and be in movies and make those type of movies, high action, high pace. And that was it. And immediately went out with my paper route. You know, I've been working ever since my parents had me working in grade 2, then on, purchased the VCR tape of Top Gun, ran that one out, did another one, and I stopped counting at 52 times watching it. So it had a very impactful, you know, good versus evil as well, right? It had a huge impact on my life. And so I set my path, and my parents signed a contract with me when I was in grade 4. You go do acting lessons, we'll loan you $900, but you need to pay us back. So I had paper routes, going to acting lessons in Toronto, Canada. And by the time I was 12, I wanted to do stuff as well for Air Cadets, but I couldn't join until I was 12 years old. And so then 12 years old came, I joined up Royal Canadian Air Cadets. And so I'm doing everything I could around the suburbs of Toronto to either pursue something in filmmaking, and did a little bit in Toronto at that time. And then also, you know, my Aunt Pat was always saying, you need a backup plan. I'm like, my backup plans are fine. I'm either going to freaking make it and write and direct and be an actor in film and do cool action stuff and take down the bad guys, or I'm going to do that in real life and fire guns and missiles if necessary as an F-18 pilot. And then unfortunately, as much happens in people's lives, Alpa, you know, God has a different plan, our creator, our higher source of power, however you define that infinite divine intelligence. And I just say creator, God, right? I'm not Roman Catholic. I wouldn't consider myself a Christian, just highly spiritual and light versus dark. And that's okay if you aren't as well, folks. And so by the time I was 18, I went for my vision test for the Royal Military College. You got to do a 4-year engineering degree to go then become a fighter pilot. And so I was like, I think ranked 5th in Canada with all my marks and all my extracurricular activities and all that kind of stuff. And went off and I failed the 2020 vision test because I was already wearing glasses. And at the same point in time, the recession loomed and my parents lost their business. We had a lumber business, you know, Ontario, right? You know, Canadians, lumberjacks in a way, right? We had a lumber manufacturing business and remanufacturing. And so they lost that. We were losing the house and they couldn't afford the partial scholarship for me to go to NYU if I wanted to do film school. So at the age of 18, you know, my 2 life's dreams, you know, for at that point in time, that was huge, right? Since I was 6 years old, were cratered in 3 weeks. So the reason why I became a Hollywood screenwriter, and I haven't actually had films that have been picked up yet, optioned right before, within 2 of my films were optioned within 4 months before the COVID pandemic in March 2020 of lockdown. And I was literally actually in Santa Monica for meetings at one of those studios that had, you know, the production company had optioned both of my scripts, which is, I guess I've learned is almost impossible that a no-name screenwriter who's never went to a film school or a writing school gets his 2nd and 3rd ever film script he wrote on spec optioned. So I was very fortunate for that. But then they locked us down, and I had to go back, or thought I had to go back to Canada for 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And so now we're working on that, with converting those into books. And yeah, exactly. Because, in Canada right now, they rolled out the digital ID on us. For folks that don't know, they rolled out the digital ID in TV, film, arts, music, and entertainment in 2021. So 2 years ago. And then and that was the only way to get paid is if you did a persona ID and you have your pronouns, you're a part-time furry and you're a half-time they, them, and a quarter part of a dragonfly, whatever the heck, right? So yeah, they totally went woke. So that's why I said goodbye to all the wokeness and picked up another way to fight back. And with a couple of people you and I know, including Tracy Joe Jaco, gave me some feedback on the Sovereign Soul Show in the logo. And I have the heart for love in Sovereign, the O, and then the I in Sovereign is Archangel Michael's sword turned upside down, ready to unsheath as a warrior, as we all should be. We should have love, but if you need to fight for something, your family, your livelihood, or yourself, and somebody attacks you, you need to be a warrior, and you need to stand up for that. And that's exactly where we have our creator. And in Soul, I have the O is actually the tree of life. And I just love the Trinity, right? The Sovereign Soul Show and love, levity, and liberty. And the Bling Buddha, as everybody sees behind me, the mascot in Alpa, you mentioned during the show, right? And I've got my Tibetan healing bracelet. I have my Tibetan healing ring, and I've been a Reiki master, Yushui Reiki master for 8 years. And the Bling Buddha fires red pills from his 9mm, a SIG 226, and he's got a Punisher tattoo on his left breast to save the children. So that's kind of more or less what I kind of stand for, that warrior, light, love, but yeah, I mean, if necessary, I can go back to being a warrior, right? But I don't always try to lead with that. So
I mean, you've got so much on
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing that. I mean, there's just so much you've done. And one thing is that we all had lives before 2020 happened. We had dreams. I don't know where everybody was on their journey, but whatever stage we're at, I mean, I was very ignorant to the conspiratorial realm. And I considered myself completely ignorant, knew nothing. And then it was very odd for me. Like I had to have a word to myself. So that how the hell did I get here? I say this time and time again, knowing very little, but the subject of children was that kind of righteous anger that got me fired up to say, hey, let's start questioning things. Something does not seem right. So of course, in that true warrior spirit, which I think it's ingrained in our soul, we are born with it, and we all are. And it's very unfortunate due to all the layers of programming and desensitization of our chakras, crown chakra especially, where our intuitive compass is very, very diluted, so that all of us have got these layers of programming, but we had a life before. And the subject of Hollywood has gained a lot of notoriety in this movement, simply because of the subject of children, and need I say any more? And you were going to embark a journey in that sort of route, like with what you were doing. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, you've been awarded and nominated as best feature screenplay for three screenplays.
Yep, across 3 films I wrote on spec. Obviously, they haven't been made yet, but yeah, quite a few.
But that's pretty cool. And yeah, tell us about you've got the ARII and then the Spirit Horse.
Yep.
And the third one I can't actually see here because it's all blurry. But there's something with children on there. So there's ARII, Spirit Horse, and the third one you can tell me.
Karma Come.
Karma Come. See, you can't see that here. Oh, right. Okay. So, and where are you taking these? They've been nominated, but what's the future of these screenplays, Brad?
Well, it's very interesting. First, to go back to the primary script that I wrote. This is kind of like half the story I've had since childhood, and the other half started flowing through me when I began writing it, and in 2016. And then 32 drafts, and 3 years later, it finally got these nominations. And so I was down June of 2019 to a Hollywood film festival to potentially be the #1 screenplay in the world for the festival and how it was voted on. And they bring up like the 3 people, myself being one, and I think it was the other 2, and they ask us on stage, and I'm on film somewhere, if it's still live on YouTube, if not, it's in a Dropbox I've got somewhere. And they ask you, what inspired you to write this? And, what do you want to see in the world? And I'm literally saying there for a good 5 minutes, I'm talking about, well, what I've learned in Reiki is vibration, somatic sounds. So when I wrote this first script, the ARII script, that was all about how we can turn off MK Ultra. And I'm saying these words having no idea, like total naivety, right? I had no idea about the wokeness that was about to fall on us. I had no idea about the pandemic that was about to be dropped on the world. I had no idea what they were doing for the most part in Hollywood and the children. I'm just finally at a point in my life where, I just went through massive death potential and divorce and healing my body. For 18 months I couldn't walk normally, and I was in a wheelchair for a little bit and all that kind of stuff. So that's a totally different story. But I'm finally going, all right, I'm going to go walk this path, write the films that I wanted to write, and then see where it goes from there. So in 2019, June, that was my thing. Like, wow, I'm here. Not to say you've made it, but that's pretty big for your first ever script. Again, 3 years, 32 later. And so I'm talking about MK Ultra on stage, and it's being broadcast live around the world, people tuning in. I had no idea. So I bet I was marked for or blacklisted from that point in time. And then I went out and I wrote another one, because I've done I've done some equine energy healing horsemanship courses, and working with Reiki, with horses, and then also with kids at certain times, very little, but that was something that's a huge passion to me, is to work with children, horses, and dolphins and whales, and bring that to the forefront from a healing standpoint, and also how much kids can teach us and animals can teach us in communication from a telepathic standpoint, and imbuing energies in our chakras to allow us to achieve that superhuman potential, which we are divinely created to achieve. Unfortunately, it's been detuned from programming and poisons and everything. Like, you guys have generated ARII and created that and brought that to the forefront naturally with Ayurvedic medicine to help save those kids, really, from the vaccines and the bioweapons that they've been pushing on us for generations. So hopefully that makes sense. That first script never got picked up. No surprise, because I'm literally out there talking about MK Ultra, detuning it, putting in nice vibrational tones that are actually the heart frequency, which now, a year ago I joined Good Lion TV, and I watched Nick talking about that. I was introduced to Nick through another show, not in a personal way, but I got to watch him and learn about it. And just like, also his stuff has been mind-blowing and opening me up to understand how nefarious, for the most part, Hollywood is. And I'm glad that that didn't happen. And we look back on these last 3 years, and I find this the greatest moments of my life, the greatest challenges for sure, and also the greatest blossoming of humanity, to be sitting here and witnessing the awakening globally, and galactics helping us out, and soon to be, from folks I've just had on my show last week, guests, soon to be those in inner to earth, presenting themselves and helping us from a benevolent standpoint create new communities for humanity. Anyway, I can go on for that for a while, but it's your show.
I love it.
It's so beautiful. So beautiful.
But this is what this movement has done. It's embraced the sense of communities.
Yes.
I know that we go through kind of the roller coaster of emotions. The energies are very heavy, and they're very intense. And I speak always towards energy vibration, because that's where that's been my intuitive compass in life. The difference is that we're taught not to trust ourselves. And if you look back and say, had I trusted my gut instinct, then we say it in jest, don't we, Brad? But, do we really honor that? So we are all gifted, all of us, we say that sixth sense, and I love it. This is like totally my language. But this movement, while it's had the negatives, it's certainly, I'm with you there, the positives, because it's interesting how I started a business before I started this movement, and it was in the corporate field. And I was like all excited, thinking, right, it's my own business, set up my own limited company in the heart of Mayfair, had the most exclusive address, and started having great clients. And I was dealing with like affluent property investors, etc., wanting their mortgages done. And it was 6 months in, and I was just really enjoying it. Little did I know that my path would change. And what you said there is very true, because God comes in and steps in. I truly believe that, because if there's something that's not in alignment with your soul, and truth be told, I never really truly enjoyed that career, but I did it for the sake of it, because it was something that was business and corporate, and my parents would be pleased subliminally. You know, that's the programming, because you have to reach these kind of ceilings in your career. But I was never happy, never truly was. I was obsessed with the subject of autism, because one, little did I know that I sit on the spectrum myself, very mildly possibly with ADHD, but with my nephew. And it's only been in the last year he got diagnosed, which we mentioned when we spoke last time. So going back to you and your journey, it's very telling that God is working for us, in favor for us. And the things that you've done, there's quite a kaleidoscope of, you know, things that have led you to where you are now. And isn't it, do you see it as a gift, Brad, that you didn't quite go the full way? Like when they saw your first script talking about MK Ultra, etc., you were sort of saved. Do you feel that ever?
It's
feel
great.
That from these dark energies?
Yeah, most definitely. And I see that now as something that I'm so grateful for. And back then I was frustrated like all get out, because, you know, I was basically paying my own way to be there to see how I could make it without representation, and being told, you know, you need to write more. We need to have a bigger repository of what you're writing. And, you know, this could be a one-hit wonder. I'm like, no, I've got a full plan here. You know, I come from an entrepreneur background. And for 14 years, I ran my own investment firm, you know, some good, some bad, learned a lot of lessons and mistakes. Yeah. And I'm like, no, I'm not just your like 18, 19-year-old kid who might have come out of high school, wrote this and whatnot. I've got a full plan on this, and building franchises and licensing and merchandising. Anyway, thank goodness that didn't happen. And thank goodness, look at what we did. You know, you mentioned in my introduction, Alpa, you know, so I was in the corporate world, and about 1 to 2 to 3 weeks a month, depending on how busy it was, my territory was New York City. And it was primarily, it was pretty much all, 99% of it, the financial and the legal vertical. And it was selling a high-tech corporate wireless solution from Canada to these, you know, investment brokers and these lawyers and whatnot. And so I would get on a plane typically on a Sunday night, go to West 57th and Broadway. They put you up at the Holiday Inn Express then, which is, you know, Midtown, right? Literally right off Broadway. And then you fly back on a Thursday, or you fly back on a Friday, and then you get up and have your weekend and then go back down and do that. And so it was supposed to be down there when 9/11 happened, but our CEO at the time, co-CEO, the sales marketing version, called everybody back and said, okay, cancel travel. We want to have a meeting. And sure enough, thank goodness that travel was canceled, because they dropped the 3 towers, right? They dropped the first 2 towers, you know, one after the other. And then several hours later, they dropped the third one, World Trade Center 7. And I happen to have clients that were in that tower. And I had, you know, clients that were also in the primary World Trade Centers. And at the same time, I was also moving out of that sales role to take on roles for what they called at the time systems integrators. And I'm using corporate speak, and I'll explain that from like a 5th grader here. Basically, there were consulting companies, EDS, Booz Allen Hamilton, who are working with Department of Defense in the United States, and we're working with Department of National Defense in Canada. And we had a wireless solution for communication, for continuity of government. So I was already working with people at the Pentagon and these organizations at the Pentagon, and also other way around. So when they dropped the World Trade Center towers and we heard about the Pentagon, there's been an explosion. I'm getting emails and messages and colleagues at the Pentagon saying missile strike, missile strike. And, you know, a few days later, here I am standing on that soil looking at a friggin' missile strike, a hole for a missile. You know, Michael Jaco had me on his show. One of the times I was on was about our 9/11 experience, because he drove up there from where he was based out of. I believe it was SEAL Team 6 at the time in 2001, or maybe he was on the CIA contracting, so he could correct this. But he did say on that show, he said, I drove up there and we could see absolutely there was no 747, right? And
Yeah.
I'm getting these real-time messages, and then I'm there, and then I'm at the Pentagon, and then I'm 18 floors below it for what I had to do for the corporate job at that time, right? So what's really amazing is, even though I witnessed this, even though we had this, and even though the narrative came out later on in 2001, it was a plane, it was all these planes, and they just misdirected this third World Trade Center tower that dropped hours later in its footprint, right? The controlled demolitions that we've all seen, and that there were no planes, it was CGI graphic, and that there was a missile, and it was not an aircraft at the Pentagon. I still didn't fully grasp how bad it was. And I kind of moved on with my life. I was pissed off. I wanted to go back and rejoin the Army, and I wanted to go over there and fight and warrior up. I just didn't want to be in corporate. Thankfully, everybody, this COVID pandemic at a high level, from a soul's level, if you believe in incarnation, which I do, from a soul's level, this is the best thing that has happened to humanity to shake everybody awake. Some aren't, and some may never. Shake everybody awake to see it, because I'm telling you a personal experience from 2001, and I was not fully awakened yet. And in 2002, my sister, who eventually joined CSIS, and after 8 years there, got the hell out, couldn't stand it. Now, surprisingly, she's a Reiki master, no surprise, and she makes crystal jewelry, but she was at one of the top levels of CSIS, right? You guys have MI6 in intelligence. She was an intelligence analyst, by the way. And then there's CIA, NSA, and all that down in the States. Well, she was the counterpart, CSIS. She red pilled me on HARP. So I've just had these two massive red pill experiences in my life, but I still kept going on. I'm not going out. Yeah, she red pilled me on HARP in Alaska, and I went and researched it. And back then in 2002 on Webcrawler, and Google was just coming out, you could find high altitude atmospheric research project in Alaska. You could see the base, you could see the antennas, you could see some of the cloud structures. It was kind of there. It was like, hey, this is a magnificent experiment. Had no idea it was global, worldwide. And there were many countries trying to control our weather, and then chemtrail us and poison us with mold and fungus and nanotechnology they put in the air. Like, it's just brutal, right? Parasites. And nothing I'm mentioning here, Alpa, as Alpa is aware, and Nick is aware, is anything considered a conspiracy theory anymore. I mean, it's spoiler. They've all been proven, right? Conspiracy fact. So this has been the greatest awakening. And I'm telling you, as somebody who's lived through it and didn't awaken enough 2 decades ago, this is a magnificent, except for the loss of life and the loss of our income and our jobs at a high level. If this didn't happen, we would have been marching probably lockstep for Agenda 2030, and we would not be able to survive, so this has been great for us overall. And that's one thing that keeps me going, by the way, folks, and Alpa, I know it does for you, and Nick as well, keeps you going, is that there is an incredible, we're almost at that tipping point where we're on the other side of the fence, and we're about to start experiencing abundance and prosperity and peace and love and a spiritual awakening unlike anything we've experienced in this three-dimensional timeline, probably for thousands of years.
Yeah, I'm with you on the whole awakening journey, because 2020 definitely gave us that 2020 vision. It was a catalyst to start waking up. But just before I go on about this point, I wanted to sort of raise something about going back to New York in 2001. I think everybody can remember where they were when they heard the news, these so-called planes going into the Twin Towers.
Right.
And when I started my earlier shows with Charlie Freak, he talks a lot about this being the sort of the temple, the two temples of our mind, and the twin, and there was all sorts of spiritual kind of references that he was giving to, and the significance of what was happening from an esoteric level. I can't remember it right now, but I always remember where I was during that time, and something didn't feel right, but I was too desensitized at the time to even start questioning it, because I was working in a very corporate environment then, in an IT reseller place. And I just remember I was at this desk, and then we got news of this, and it just didn't sort of comprehend to the level that it should have. So I was also very deeply programmed back then, not having a clue about, the corruption behind this. Fast forward to where we are now, and the point you just raised about that this couldn't have been a better thing for humanity. I agree. In my previous show, Amelia mentioned that, like, if we thought 2020, 2021, 2022 was terrible, from the esoteric level, the spiritual warfare that's going on, Brad, what can we expect? If we are not congruent with God now, this is a real testament in pushing us all into alignment with God. And I said this in the previous show, that this is what's going to be our armor. And yes, we're going out there fiercely. The crisis, we can look at the crisis, i.e. the scamdemic, and let it kind of consume us and disempower us. And I put up a post yesterday on my Instagram from my heart and said that I found the last sort of 6 months acutely very, very tough with the spiritual warfare that's been going on, both personally and then collectively. It's the worst I told you so ever. And of course, being kind of censored because it's on YouTube and live. What we are seeing that is being breadcrumbed in the media is a testament of our faith, that we knew that this was true. We fought for it and people thought we were crazy in 2021. But what we must understand, that everything is a process, right, Brad? Everything has to play a part, because if you tell people, hey, there's Alpa Soni and Brad that's telling you, oh my God, there's all these conspiracies and this is what's happening with the children. I literally, and I still get that now. I still get that very much, that cognitive dissonance now. They're like, what is she on? Fourth thing later. And because they're being more and more desensitized. And we are living in that kind of world where there's this split polarity. And we thought back then, yeah, they're going to really wake up, but they didn't. But understanding that this is God's plan. I'm not going on by any geopolitical plan, that this is God's plan, that if we've been this tightly programmed, i.e. that Alpa Soni back in 2001 didn't even flinch, felt something energetically, but didn't bother to ask any questions, didn't even read any books about the conspiratorial realms and stuff. So it's a testament to show where humanity is. What do? We've turned that crisis into a blessing. Right. And exactly what you said so eloquently there, Brad. Thank you very much, because I am certainly on par with that everything can be channeled. And it's this polarity that we live in life constantly. And we want to come into that equilibrium so we can synthesize the charges that these negative and positive charges that have, so that we can come into that equilibrium with God. But does it happen easily? Absolutely not. So how do we combat that? And this is what the communities that we've forged these connections with, so meeting yourself, you speaking to so many people, it's going in all sorts of directions. I'm not so concerned about that. The main thing is humanity is waking up. Now, people like yourself have been these freedom warriors. And I love the story. Like, you know, I had to put that on the title, from Hollywood Screenwriter to freedom warrior, because that's going to be sparking the attention of people. And like, you've come from many different facets of life and many different experiences, so that you can actually embrace that and then bring that, nurture it, and all in the name of love, right?
Correct. Yeah, most definitely. And number one, the community, I believe, that you have created is extremely key from a support mechanism, from a socialization standpoint. I mean, we human beings, regardless of whether you have people who like to be hermits, right? And your left brain, very analytical, or your right brain, artist, very creative, right? And there are segments of that in psychology. You know, there's an owner in a business, right? You have an owner, you have an operator, you have an artist, right? And all those people are part of making that business happen. And that business can also be in a family's environment, right? Mother, father, or the siblings as well, and harmonizing. And then in a community, that's also extremely key, are having those people from a leadership role, a managerial role, a stand back, pull the levers role, and then the creative artists in all sense and forms. And I'm speaking about healers here too, right? Both from a naturopathic standpoint and even from a light working standpoint. And that's not to create disparity between a light worker who is in Reiki isn't a light worker if they're a naturopath, or a chiropractor. I'm kind of lumping you all in as one. So number one, what's key, folks, is stay involved in the community here with Alpa and Love in Action. Beautiful. Love it. And by the way, the weird coincidence is when I met you and knew about Love in Action, I'm like, the very first film I worked on in Canada, it was a Hallmark film, was called Love in Action. I'm like, how How crazy
No
is
way.
you know, like what a weird coincidence. I'm like, I've never heard Love in Action before. That was first film I ever worked on. I'm like, and Love in Action. I'm like, okay, so amazing. My first ever show, you know, in the UK. I mean, I know you have global audience. I'm like, Love in Action, you know, stepping forward. Really cool coincidence here, right? And Trinity, right? Love in Action, Trinity. The second thing, folks, I would say, Alpa, and hopefully I'm making sense in what I'm sharing here with your audience. The second thing is it's okay to be pissed off. And I believe the programming we've had, you know, my parents came up Roman Catholic. They are both descendants of their family fleet occupied Europe. My mom in France, her parents were fleet occupied Europe, France from the Nazis, came over to the shores in Canada, French Canadian mother, and her father and his two brothers soldiered up and went back and fought for 5 years in World War II. And then I also had on my father's side, his parents from Poland and the Ukraine, farmers, right? Villages in Poland and the Ukraine at the time, fled Europe with their families from the Blitzkrieg, got on a boat in the UK, took that boat to Halifax, Nova Scotia, got off that boat not knowing how to speak English or French. They're Polish and Ukrainian farmers, spoke to a customs agent from Canada, found out they were farmers, gave them free passage on a train all the way to Saskatchewan, Canada, which is above North Dakota, if you look at it. So now they've spent months traveling with only the clothes on their back and what was in their suitcase. And they get there and they have 150 hectares to farm of land that needs to be plowed and starting their lives over. So we've had the programming in Roman Catholic and other religions that, you know, you can't be angry. You know what? Process it, right? Because that's like a block, a boulder in a stream, right? And you need to remove it. So, but process it in a healthy way, whether it's punch a pillow or, you know, just like have an outrage discussion with a good partner. Maybe you have a spouse or a good friend. You're like, listen, I just want to be listened to. This is really pissing me off, and get that through. And then go back to what Alpa and I were sharing here in this message, that from a high level, from a spiritual level, from an esoteric level as well, that this is the greatest awakening for humanity, and that life is literally never going to be the same again. It is. We are winning. I mean, just look at right now. We're live. Today is the day that they started the World Economic Forum conference in Davos. What happened over the last 24 hours? Sorry, Soros can't make it. Sorry. Klaus Schwab can't make it. He's got a little bit of the sniffles. Maybe he had too much of the, and we're on YouTube here, so I can't go too far. But you all kind of get that. And then we had, you know, one of the most evil as well in South Africa just said, oh, sorry, I can't attend, right? And what we're also seeing in the United States, we have that guy, you know, that has his last name that sounds like a particular card in a deck. I don't know how far we can go with this on YouTube, so that's why I'm speaking around it. And when he makes announcements, especially over the last 2 months, you are not seeing all the other people come back on social media freak out. And then I just had Jack with the, you know, whose laptop on again on my show last week, and you're seeing that Biden laptop just explode everywhere finally, right? And he was back on my show. He came first on in summer. And you're seeing the narrative completely shift to the abundance of humanity. So I want to anchor these points down for you and your audience. I know you're already anchored to this, Alpa, for your audience, Alpa, that if you're getting upset, process that in a safe way, and then understand and look at all of the amazing things where we are about to shift into love, prosperity, peace, and abundance. It does not mean, though, to be complacent. Complacency kills. Nothing in nature, like you look at that lovely plant behind Alpa, nothing in nature is complacent. You're either growing or dying. That's it. You're evolving, right? And we need to evolve, and you need to have love, but you also, like you beautifully put it, the armor of God. Wear the armor of God in spirit. And if somebody knocks on your door and they want to take out your family, you need to know how to fight them. You need to know how to stand up. You can't just shrink back, because that's what they want from humanity. And there's still some nasty mid-level, mid-management cockroach players out there on the evil side, although the majority of them have scattered right now from all the reports we've heard. You know, I've had SG and on, I've had Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bose from Australia on, I've had a number of tier 1 folks, you know, and again, if I'm not going to say his name, that Navy SEAL's name, because he's had his channel taken down, 14 times here. as I've had two of mine, if you say his name more than once, and other folks, you know, Janine on, and from the ancient, the current, and the quantum, everybody is saying, folks, and you know, you can go to my shows, go back to Alpa shows, and see this in the last 60 days. Almost everybody is seeing this massive shift. That doesn't get same-day suicide for kids 12 and up in Canada off the hook. And, you know, I had my own ballistic show. I think I dropped 30 F-bombs on that because of what they're doing in Canada still and rolling it out. So in different parts of the world, there's still stuff that needs to be shaken out. And in Canada, you know, we're just having kids at the age of 12 and up can walk into a hospital and get a same-day suicide right now. And if you're 16 and up in Canada, you don't need parental consent. And none of this needs to be written anymore. You know, there were 10,000 people euthanized in Canada in 2021. And we know the number is 10,000 because in 2021, the law required them to have it in writing that they have too much PTSD from, I don't know, the photocopier machine at work to whatever, lockdown. And then they can walk in and then the doctor will suicide them. And they call it medical assistance in dying. And there's now commercials across Canada that they're still running on state-run Canadian media called Die with Dignity. And they put out that euthanasia book to normalize suicide for kids. It looks like a coloring book, and it's sponsored by the Turdo government, right? We know his real name, but again, because we're on YouTube. So you can still be angry at that, and you still need to warrior up for that, because in different pockets of countries around the world, not everything has become benevolent yet. It's getting there. But the more that we stand up, we come together as a community, that's how we can accelerate the benevolence, prosperity, and the love and the peace that we'll eventually feel. And that's why you need to stand up and talk and share and have these conversations. And the media is eventually going to be there for you.
I love everything that you've just shared there. I mean, it's just full of mighty full energy. And I just feel like I want to get my sword and just go into the battlefield. I don't know if anyone feels that right now, but I just feel, because I was feeling a bit, you used the word complacent. I wouldn't say I was getting complacent. I was getting despondent, Brad. And this journey, I'm a soft soul, and I have, you know, found each year that has gone by, and we're in our almost third year. We had no anticipation of what this was going to bring, and we kind of charged ahead in full warrior force, irrespective of what was going on. But what's happened in between is the egocentric kind of views. Everyone has an opinion, and that's okay. We have these kind of this truth, that truth, and it's kind of like a psyop sometimes, I think, within the communities to cause further confusion and further divide. However, the message that you said, which is just so poignant and congruent with my motto, which is love is the answer. So we can take people's views. We don't necessarily have to agree with them, and that's okay. I've been confused as well. We've kind of felt exhausted that, when are we going to have disclosure? What's going to happen? But when we truly understand that this is a process, and I remember saying this in 2020 when I was on everybody's shows. I didn't bother starting my own channel, but in 2020, I was on everyone's show, this Indian girl from North London screaming, save the children, you know, crying on the shows, thinking, why are people not waking up? It was exhausting. However, at the moment, you use the word narrative. This is a movie playing out. It really feels like that. And I'm not talking about any of the number 17s that people think is playing out. I've taken a back seat from that whole politicized movement. But in terms of seeing this play out, and the breadcrumbing of the media is necessary. There are deliberate psyops that I think, this is just my view, okay, that are happening to be a catalyst to start shaking people. And some of the names that you could mention, 8 rhyme with 8. He's a big catalyst to start shaking things up, because he's making references to all the things that we are, but it's having a wider reach, and it's getting mainstream media. You have Dr. Asim Malhotra here in the UK, big advocate, like, who took the thing, and his father passed, and now he started asking questions. He's a big cardiologist, and you know, he's getting a lot of, I'm actually interviewing him, folks, on Wednesday.
Awesome. I shared his post last week on Twitter. I'm still shadow banned there, but we're still getting after it. So that's amazing. I'd love to watch that show and share it when I mean, I just put
it. It's going to be on the Patriot Party News. Amelia she's just an amazing lady. She just says, right, well, you fill in for me. And in fact, you just do those shows with him.
Yes.
And I'm like, just went into the deep end. I was like, oh, crap, I better get myself up to speed.
Yeah.
But, you know, God sort of pushes you in the direction that you're meant to go in. And these things that are happening, as much as we can get despondent, like I said, we have to have the real eyes to realize that these are necessary steps for us as well in our own awakening journey. Because let me ask you this, haven't you gone through these last 3 years, and then there's things that you thought would happen that didn't, then there's more things that you learn about yourself in your own personal life, and you think, crap, more healing required here, right, I got this, or oh my God, like the various kind of emotions that come with this. It is a magnificent journey. And when we look back in that positivity, we'll think, wow, that was all very necessary.
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
necessary.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right on point. And also, like the things when people have said dates, or that by this time, you know, I mean, we had 107. I don't even know if we can say his name here on this channel.
Yeah, I think
107, right? You know, giving us that little briefing about, okay, you know, National Guard's going to roll out, and then, you know, U.S. Thanksgiving comes to pass, and you don't see them rolled out on the streets, but it might be behind the scenes, but you don't see that. But you're just like, this is the weekend, finally, after 5, 6, 20 false starts over the year, you know. The people, the family that's blocked me, called me conspiracy theorist. You're going to have that vindication, and then it doesn't happen. And one of those things to learn about yourself is, and I'm also guilty of this, right? So I'm just sharing with you openly, folks, is you want to feel vindication, right? The family that's blocked you, the family that's ostracized you, the friends included in that, the peers, the colleagues, and they've went off, even if you pleaded with them not to get the you know what in the arm. And then they've dissed you, and you're like, I want that vindication. Honestly, that's an ego thing, and that's fine, because that's a human experience. But step back from that. You don't have to go out there and start shouting it, right? Now, I use memes like we have on every one of our interviews, like when Alpa was on weeks ago.
And they've provided great humor. Come on, we got to admit it. Love it. And I do it, and I'm not, you know.
It's the way to go too, right? It helps. There's so much that can be conveyed in a meme with laughter. And to me, it's beautiful British humor, because I grew up watching Fawlty Towers and Benny Hill and oh goodness, what was the other? Monty Python, right? We love the Monty Python. And then Strange Brew came out in Canada, and SCTV. And then and I did fortunately do improv for one level, the first level of 3 at Second City, Toronto years ago. And it was so enjoyable. And here's the thing with humor, right? Is if you can turn your vindication around into humor, and hopefully that laughter wakes them up. They might not totally wake up, but that's another way to seed it, you know, rather than maybe just share, you know, here's the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros on December 26, 2022, declaring, guess what? Those things that do this, they're killing children worldwide, right? Can't say the direct quote here, but you and I have it. And if you send that to those friends and family, you're just going to turn them off even more. But if you send them a meme and go, I hope you're well, and there's an actual funny meme, that maybe that'll help, right? You know.
Yeah. But we were getting the attention. I noticed this just today. It's really weird. We're in a retrograde. We're coming towards the end.
It's been crazy.
By the 18th, and then there's the 3-week sort of post-retrograde hangover, as I say. And I'm quite sort of sensitive to these energies, but I don't really, this time I wasn't paying as much attention. In the back of my mind, I've known it's been a retrograde, or we're moving into it, but easily we can forget. So this is the time for us to sort of realize, recognize, redo so many things, and not be scared by any of this, because any kind of fear within ourselves will then attract more of that. And this is the internal dialogue that I have with myself many, many times, Brad, that, you know, we are in control of this, of our heart, our mind, our soul, and what we put out there. It is okay to feel the anger. It is okay to get a bit disgruntled by the annoyance of the family and the friends. We've all been there, done that, wore the t-shirt. And there is that certain sense of, this isn't the most like, the nicest I told you so, because it's not. but everyone has that kind of little bit like, really, I know, when are you going to see the truth? And then we can get governed by that anger and, go into those egocentric wars within ourselves and the people that we love. And you said something very important that I want everyone to take away. And just before I say that point, I want to acknowledge everybody in the chat. Thank you for being here. Some lovely comments going on. I'm just been so focused on the conversations that I haven't been putting them up on the screen, but thank you everyone. Richard, Shauna, Harry, yeah, there's quite a few people. My thing's frozen, but yeah, thank you for being here. Kick Dreaming, you're always here. So you just want to, Scarlett, thank you for being here again. Serena, really appreciate it. But this is something that I don't know whether you can resonate with this, but when we've gone along in this journey and as things are unfolding, and I'd say it's a bit more than breadcrumbing now. And for me, I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder, and an angry chip on my shoulder. And I used to think it was a righteous chip on my shoulder, because I remember messaging all my family and friends saying, you don't have to speak to me ever again. I don't care. Right? I really don't care if you don't speak to me again, because this is your life and I love you. Your life means more to me than any of this kind of egocentric wars that you want to have with me and think I'm crazy and ludicrous and aligning to the mainstream. And I get why you're thinking what you're doing. And I remember screaming at my best friend from uni. And I went psychotic, Brad. I have a psychotic side. I was like, you can't take this. You can't do it, right? We fell out. We didn't speak for 6 months, but lo and behold, she listened. She didn't speak to me, and she actually listened. But where we are now, and she's like, I'm really grateful that I didn't do it. And because I was going to fall out with you over this. Love truly is the answer, because if people can see your intention, where they're not going to listen, what do we do then, Brad? What do we do? Do we get ourselves completely depleted in energy, or do we continue the war and we do our bit? Because maybe we're not meant to wake our family and friends up. Because if it was that easy, we may not have gone out there to fight the good fight. If it was that easy, and everyone in my family's awake, well, then I don't really need to do much, and I'm really glad. No, we are meant to serve humanity at a grander scale and evoke the hearts and the attention of people. I had so many people at the TT place. Oh my God, almost said it. And coming up to me and saying, you were the reason that, I woke up. And these are people that are confirming, giving you feedback that your work and what you're doing is for a greater audience, so that we don't get then sad and feeling despondent that our friends and family haven't. Now, then there's the worry. Right? Then there's the worry that, okay, they have, now what? Laura Eisenhower made a really good point the other day on the show that I was with on the PPN network, is that a lot of people who took it, who knew that it wasn't right, said, I'm not worried and I don't fear it at all. I'm going to be fine. I now know that it's not right, but whatever will happen, it's not that I devalue my life. I didn't know enough information back then, but now I surrender to God. What will happen there, Brad? What, in your views, do you think, there are a lot of people out there that are feeling this, they're like, oh crap. But some people are like, nothing's going to happen to me. So she said that the cells in their body, through their thinking, through their thought, through the power of their will, that it can shift. I mean, a lot of people might disagree with this, and I'm open to all views, but, what do we do? Do we continue the fear mongering and the I told you so? It's like telling off a child that's done something wrong. No, that's not in alignment with the higher vibrational energies.
Well, yeah, thank you, Alpa, and well noted. And there's three points to make. The first point was about fear. And, fear is a great motivator. And I believe that fear is necessary for us in this human existence that we're having, especially at this point in time, because as long as you don't get frozen in panic, so I went through Bronze Cross, Bronze Medallion as a kid, and the swimming and whatnot, and then almost became a lifeguard, but then I slipped right into the Army. By the way, that's how I got in the Army, because I saw what was going on in Kosovo back then, and I had just been denied with my 2020, not having 2020 vision, so I couldn't go to RMC, and then my parents couldn't afford the half scholarship to go to NYU Film School. I'm like, what do I do? And I'm like, well, I just see this genocide going on in Kosovo. And I've been wearing a uniform for 6 years. I know it's Royal Canadian Air Cadets, but I'm like, I'm going to want to go and do something, right? Because my fear then was, I have an ability to potentially help make a difference. And I couldn't look at myself. I would be scared to look at myself in the mirror if I didn't do anything. That's one way that fear can be helpful. Another one is from a security standpoint for yourself, right? Like the fear that my friends are going to hurt themselves. That fear prompted you to have a righteous indignation and speak to the friend. And literally, I believe in that circumstance, saved her from getting that. So that fear can be healthy as long as it doesn't paralyze you. And I've been in multiple situations where I've rolled up on accidents, right? You've talked about my background, and I've had treated people with shock, treated people with head wounds, until the paramedics arrived and called them on 911. And I've been run over on my motorcycle. That's what took me 18 months to walk again, went up through windshield, cartwheeled across 3 lanes, slammed into a fire hydrant, and that fear that pissed me off was the fear I couldn't walk again, do my stuff. And so this leads me into responding to your second question about what do we do with people. And my father, full-blown alcoholic. And so what do we do with people? And the last message that I gave him, this is years ago, and you learn this from Brahma, right, who is the Hindu creator god, right, of knowledge and wisdom. And so this is about 5-6 years ago with my father. Like, nobody's going to change. You can't force somebody to change unless they themselves want to change. So with my father and his alcoholism, what I had said to him was, I love you. I'll always be here for you if you decide to change. And that was it. And he came back with a really nasty response, and that was it. And so just bless it. And still pissed off he didn't wake up. But that was just it. That's his journey. And in an incarnation standpoint, maybe this is his soul's path. And so to expand that to where we are today with your friends, family members, community, your neighbors, whomever, this may be their path. This may be something, if you go back incarnation, right? Maybe they have a soul contract, if anybody believes in that. Maybe they went, you know what? I'm going to do this because I'll be one of the hundreds of millions that helps serve the awakening of humanity. And when we have a Earth who has been reborn, rechristened, in a new vibration, because we're entering the Aquarian age now. This was the last effect that we just had from the solar stuff that's been going on. I don't know how far we can go with YouTube, but we're now in the Aquarian age, right? What just came to pass with all this craziness is we're in the Aquarian age. And this age of Aquarius is that divine feminine opening up. So that divine feminine, we have to bless them. You could still be upset with them and move on. Because there can be total strangers. Like, my goodness, since you and I had met at the TT in California, I had 700 people on Rumble. 3.5 months later, there's almost 12,000 subscribers to the show. Now, it was kicked off, multiple platforms. Spotify kicked me off because I uploaded a poem about Save the Children. So did this particular platform. I recorded and uploaded a poem to Save the Children. And they went, misinformation. You know what kind they said it was. It had nothing to do with it. So they're afraid. But there's other ways to help people and be out here and come together as a community. And then the third part is taking care of yourself, which is really key. From an internal standpoint, your inner health, right? And then also your physical health. You might not be a big workout person, but at least move your body. Do a little bit of yoga. I'm huge into yoga. It helps with surfing. It helped massively when I could finally walk again, expedited me. And here's another thing about how your body heals. And to your point of those people who said with Laura on that show on PPN, that said that it's not going to affect me. It very, very virtually, it could. They could literally just be willing their DNA that they're going to be fine. And in my personal experience, I was on that motorcycle hit. I was to have 3 surgeries. My orthopedic surgeon was Tiger Woods and Lindsey Vonn's surgeon in Vail, Colorado. And he was like, you need to have 3 massive surgeries. It's going to take about 3 to 4 years to heal. We have to go 6 to 12 months between surgeries. So you can heal between this. So you can get your shoulder back, your head back, your leg back, walking back. And you might only have 70% mobility again of what you currently were doing. And what did I do? I chose not to go under the knife. I purposely chose to become vegan because I understand about, there's a word we can't say here, but it has to do like you put a key in your door, and then later you lation it, which is like what ARII does, and you guys in that product. And I chose to do that to get all the smoking and the mercury and stuff out of my body. my body healed, and I'm in far better shape now at this age of my life, and I have 100% of my life back in physical activity, and I can do triathlons and whatnot. And I did that by willing it. I did it through Reiki, acupuncture, PT,
Wow.
and
Story
all
there.
natural and by natural. So I totally believe what your friends are saying on that show, and Laura mentioned on that show. It could it could very, very likely happen, because we are superhuman. And when you tap into that with belief, heck, there's how many recorded spontaneous miracles and healings have happened throughout history. So I totally believe if they believe it, they could will that to happen. And I'm
the story is extraordinary there. 70%, of capacity, and in a wheelchair. I didn't know that part. So, you've gone through some tough journeys there, Brad, and thank you for sharing that with us all. And that's a true testament, folks, to see that the power of the mind, the power of your will and your soul, and of course, the energy that you put up, and knowing that plant-based plants help you heal. Now, I'm not here to advocate veganism or meat or this or that, but what is meant
now, just to be clear about that. Now back on.
I was vegan for a while. My blood type, when Laura and I, we were like, oh, me too. I'm B positive. So essentially, that's pescatarian, but I've never liked fish, and I just, but I loved my dairy. But I have had to, you see, the Indian diet's quite healthy. We have a lot of grains, and it suits me. Veganism didn't quite suit me. But I think I was also being a bit of a rebel at one point when I didn't know enough about kind of the substitute stuff that I was having. I wasn't having it much, to be fair. Like, my diet consists of lots of lentils, pulses, and then we have lots of spices in our food. And when I say spices, like the coriander powders, the turmeric, and all of that. So in our diet, like if I was eating a true healthy Indian diet, not your takeaways and your Lahori kebabs and all these oily kind of stuff, but the true kind of, if the Gujarati food that we have is pretty healthy if made in a certain way. And then the mix and how you mix certain foods together. But all that has been diluted in modern day Western sort of approaches, because my grandfather, he lived till almost 90, and he had a staple Indian diet, and he smoked 20 a day, and he had his pint of Guinness every single day, and no health issues. And he was a very deep into yoga and meditation. And I wish I had the knowledge to learn from him and his expertise, but he was just not that way inclined to teach. But I just used to see how his form was, his body language. And he always used to make up these potions for me, and they used to work. And it's all based on the principles of Ayurveda, which is what ARII is about. So there's so many things out there that can help you in your journey. You've got to work out what works for you. And I'm about the blood types, because I thought that makes sense. Because there was a point when my body was craving eggs, Brad. So with your journey, it's extraordinary. I mean, you've blown me away there, like with the things you've done and how you've healed yourself. And that is true, that if you have a loved one and that you're worried about, first of all, don't put out that energy. Guess what? I'm guilty. I sat there for weeks, like crying my eyes out, thinking, oh my God, fearing the worst, false evidence appearing real. But what is going to happen, as the Bhagavad Gita says, what is happening for the good. What will happen is also happening for the good. Let's strip away the ego and our egocentric wants about what we will to happen, because God's in control. But we have to try and stay in that state of balance all the time. And I am no yogi or no saint, just an ordinary girl that's trying to navigate her ways through these energies, just like yourself, Brad. And you have had some phenomenal gnosis that's been imparted today. Some great comments coming as well. And thank you for that as well. But yeah, you are right. We are living in extraordinary times. And so we're coming up to over an hour. And before we end, I just want to take people to the Sovereign Soul Show. The links are at the bottom. You can find him on Telegram as well. So if you go on his Telegram channel and his Rumble, you'll find all the wonderful things that he does on his shows and all the wonderful people that he has on his shows. Is there, before we come to it, as we're drawing to an end, Brad, any message that you want to leave the audience. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Yeah, so have I. And I'm deeply appreciative to you, Alpa, and then also the audience for tuning in, the global audience. You know, I mean, first of all, that just speaks highly to you that you're already an involved soul who is here watching Alpa's show. That's really key for you to acknowledge. And I think that one of the two things I'd like to say is, number one, give yourself some credit, folks. Like literally, it's not hubris to sit there and pat yourself on the back for being here at this stage of life, regardless of what has transpired. You all deserve a pat on the back, and for tuning in to Alpa shows, because this has been the largest spiritual war on the planet for eons. And you're here. You're still here, and you're seeking a way to improve, and you're seeking information to evolve and help yourself in your ascension. Your ascension, I can just mean like you have a higher vibrational field, not all of a sudden you're out of this meat suit, you know, because we're a carbon and a crystalline structure. And I can tell you with everything intuitively I feel is it's not going to be 5D ascension and you're out of the meat suit in a year. I feel we're going to be kicking around for a few more. And as a kid, I was saying 120 years old, I'm going to live to 120. I don't know why I was saying that when I was a kid. Now I'm like easily 220. Here we go. In a great, healthy, young, youthful, vibrant way, because that's what God created for us. That's number one. And number two, at the audience, I would say is don't step back, you know, especially if things get you down. Your inspiration and your motivation. Remember, the word inspiration, inspire, comes from Latin, from inspiratu, which is to be in spirit. The spirit, that's your soul, your unique expression in this lifetime. So if there's anything you see in the media, anything you hear from a communication or an email you get, or wherever you are in your environment, and it gets you down, this is where you come back to for your inspiration and hearing from other people and their stories and the information they have to share. And I feel that that is really key to helping us understand there's that community and moving forward. So it's really simplified. You know, wow, 45 comments. What a great number. It's really simplified, folks, is even in a virtual sense, belonging to a motivational, inspirational, high vibration community is absolutely key for you moving forward as a human being. And pat yourself on the back for that. Like, you literally deserve, you know, cheers to that. If you could do the wave, do the wave. And it's as simple as that, Alpa. That's what I believe.
Love it. I love it. Well, look, as we draw to an end, thank you so much, Brad. I've really enjoyed myself here, and I'd love to invite you back again. We can kind of
awesome. Let's do it.
Get you on with Nick actually as well, because you can be talking all Hollywood.
Oh, great. Yeah, we haven't met officially in any capacity yet, so that would be awesome.
No, definitely. I think you both individually would have a great conversation. So I'll definitely get that arranged. But in the meantime, everyone, please, my YouTube seems to have been censored again. The numbers have been cut off. As soon as I did one of the shows, I think it was with Mark Hatwood. One of the shows, they didn't censor it, but it went up when I had, you know, when I was doing the one when you were in the room, and it was crazy because my numbers just did not go up. That's why I'm kind of like, because this is the audience where it's my largest audience. And then I've got my show on Rumble. So the link's there as well. I'll be putting this on Rumble. And I'll just implore everyone to share this video, like it, give it the thumbs up to help me with my algorithms. And of course, please do check out Brad's channels. Some of his shows are really, really good. And you're a brilliant host, Brad, I have to say. I'm really feeding off this energy because doing this, as you know, just before we finish, it actually consumes a lot of energy. Yes. It really does. Yep. And then you get kind of hit with new information and you're like, whoa, am I the host here, or am I just, sometimes I go like this and then I have to remind myself I'm the host. Yeah. And then I'm just there like listening to my host intently, you know, to my guests, sorry. But my audience are lovely. Like I said, I'm not here someone to give out dates and this, that, the other. These are the messages. Learning through people's journeys is what I think is valuable. And it just can give you that nugget of wisdom. When we stay humble in our heart and determined to carry on, because it's not going to be a walk in the park over the next few years, but the spirit and having an exuberant spirit is very important. So with all of that said, Brad, thank you so much for coming on. Everyone that's been here, I love you. Thank you for supporting me. You'll be seeing a lot more of me on my YouTube regularly. There's some great guests that I've got lined up. And also, I implore everyone to go onto goodlion.tv because the new Pervywood is out based on Elon Musk. It should be, we've got the 7-minute teaser out there. And I think it should be out now. I've got to check, slap on the wrist for not knowing. But please do go and visit goodlion.tv and, of course, our autism range, aribrand.com. Brad, with love in my heart, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Lots of love.
Much love, everybody. Cheers. Bye-bye now.